Every year, thousands of human remains are found in the United States, and in 1 of every 4 instances, authorities can't identify the body. That's starting to change. I'm Dave Killen, co-host of The Unidentifieds, a new limited series podcast from the Oregonian and Oregon Live. We go deep into several cold cases and explain the science that's helping experts give these long-forgotten people their names back. Look for The Unidentifieds after you've finished listening to this podcast. Subscribe to The Unidentifieds on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome into another Wednesday, a.k.a. Hook Day edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast. Muhammad Ahmad and Andrew Gillis and Mike Nizick here with you once again, bringing you all the goods to get you through the middle of the week. And before we get you through the middle of your week, we want to remind you all to sign up for our Cincinnati Football Insider Subtext service. And I've been talking a whole heck of a lot about it the last couple of days, so enough of hearing it from me. Andrew, you've been sending out some really fun, cool texts and some engaging discussions with our subscribers, our growing subscriber base, I should add. Why do people need to sign up for Cincinnati Football Insider, and why is it a good investment?
Well, you're going to get our thoughts kind of before anybody else sees them, which we know are incredibly valuable. We're getting into the time of year where, there's not a lot going on, and, but with this service, you're going to get to hear kind of constant updates from us. Are there any personnel moves happening as we get closer to training camp? Who's signing? Are there any veteran additions they could make? Who's getting cut? Things like that. That's going to start to come into play. So yeah, it's a good time to sign up as always, just because again, there's not a lot of football talk going on across the whole kind of across the whole landscape of the NFL. But we have kind of constant football talk for you. So yeah, it's like I said, great time to sign up and kind of stay up to date on Bengals news each day.
It's $4.99 a month. You get a 2-week free trial to start, and you can text STOP anytime to the number that you text to sign up. To get that number, you can go to cleveland.com/Bengals. Takes literally a minute to sign up. All you got to do is punch in your phone number, and you are good to go. All right, so we're going to change things up a little bit. I was kind of thinking about some cool, fun ideas we could do for this podcast, and something I was thinking about, we talk a little bit about the AFC North when it comes to free agency crossover and other similar crossovers, but I want to sort of maybe show some love to the Bengals rivals, and what I want to do today is you have the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns. What we're going to do is I want you guys, and myself included, to pick a player from each team that you would like to see on the Bengals. The only rule here is you cannot pick somebody who is an all-pro and or a Pro Bowler. So Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Najee Harris, Odell Beckham, Justin Tucker. Those guys are off the table. So someone who's not that good, but good enough where you're like, hey, I like that guy, and I think he makes a case for playing for the Bengals. So this is creative. This is fun. We're going to get wacky with it. So I guess we'll start with our rivals up north in Cleveland, and I want to start with you, Mike. If you had to pick a player from the Cleveland Browns who fits that criteria I mentioned, who would you pick for them to play for the Bengals and why?
Why don't you start with Andrew? I'm still looking up.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I think you can kind of look at a couple different places on the roster and say, okay, I think this is kind of, it's not like a, NFL draft. You're looking for, where guys can help out, where guys can kind of fill in. The two options for me were David Njoku and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Nice.
The thing with Owusu-Koramoah is that, he can play in coverage and he can do a bunch of different things. But I'm actually going to go with David Njoku. you kind of look at his numbers throughout his career, and they haven't really popped off the page to you. A career average of 30 yards a game, only 11.6 yards per reception, 206 receptions across 79 games. Those are not numbers that are, all Pro Bowl numbers. But one, you would assume that there would be kind of a bump for Njoku coming over to the Bengals. I think that he would just give you a dynamic element that, you don't really have right now on this roster. You look at kind of what he can give you athletically. I think he's like 6'4", 250. Back when he came into the league, he was 21 years old. He was a really young player. He's still only 26. And, when he came into the league, he ran a 4.64 40. That's just a player that I think would give you a different dynamic. So, and I think he would help out at a position of need. And, frankly, I think he'd be tight end 1 if he were to come over immediately. So I think David Njoku would make a really, really big impact obviously with Myles Garrett off the table, your options are kind of limited.
Good options. Are you biased for Owusu Koromoa? Because I know he's a Notre Dame guy, just like you. So,
yeah, Koromoa, to me, it happens. You look at the roster and it just like I was making this pick and I was like, you know what, I can't justify taking JOK when Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt and Akeem Davis-Gaither are on the roster. I think he gives you a different dynamic than you get from like a Jermaine Pratt. Like I think he's a coverage. He's better in coverage than Jermaine Pratt is. He's a really, really good player. A lot of people in Cleveland kind of talk about him, making a leap forward in year 3. But I think Njoku's the pick.
Mike, who's your pick?
Yeah, I think Njoku's a good pick. 6'4", 246, so big bodied guy. It's been pretty consistent. Obviously, kind of a red zone threat, 19 touchdowns during his career. So I would have no issue with that. I think Elijah Moore deserves some consideration. I think it was one of their best moves of the offseason, that trade to land him. Moved Moore to the slot last year. But is comfortable lining up wide, would fit kind of what the Bengals do. Kind of speedy guy underneath, I think would benefit them. I think he has room to grow. I think, he's been okay. Had a really promising rookie year, dropped off a little bit last year. But I just think, they're looking for that next Tyler Boyd guy, to fit into the offense. And he's obviously still very young, only in his 3rd season. He might fit well and kind of get the Burrow bump as a receiver.
Yeah, Elijah Moore is a guy I was thinking about too, who they traded for obviously this offseason. I think if you go kind of outside of like the options that you and Andrew had, which by the way, those are good options. I love the Njoku one. You guys both mentioned his value. I was thinking more of a safety look because, they have Grant Delpit, who was Joe Burrow's former teammate at LSU, who's been pretty good, I think, for what he's worth. And then they just got Juan Thornhill, who I mentioned on this podcast, I thought would land with the Bengals in free agency. Instead, they go the Nick Scott route. And obviously safety's not a glaring need because they drafted Jordan Battle, because they got Nick Scott, like I mentioned. So I think I'm going to kind of pivot away from that. And you're going to laugh at this. You are going to laugh at this. I would go with Corey Borquez, their punter. First of all, I like his name. That's just really cool. But here's the thing. Like, people say with Brad Robbins being the pick, like he's the guy, he's secure. Like, but we don't know what we're going to get out of him. Like, I think he's good on film, no touchbacks, best hang time in college football last year playing for Michigan. But we don't know how that'll translate to the NFL because, you look at Drew Chrisman, he was pretty darn good in college too. I think he was special teams player or like the punter of the year in the Big Ten his last year at Ohio State. And we kind of saw that once he filled in for Kevin Huber, it's a little bit shaky. And that's why they drafted Brad Robbins to essentially replace Chrisman. Now you could say, they have 2 punters. Switch out one of them for Borquez and then just have that your competition. But I wanted to have fun with that one, just something different from what you guys had. And I think it's a realistic answer. But those are really good options. I think now I want to pivot over out east to Baltimore. Quite a few options there and some interesting options that I think you can kind of shift through. But who wants to go first? Who would you pick from the Baltimore Ravens to be a member of the Cincinnati Bengals if it was a wand in your hand?
Andrew, that's your team. I'm going to let you go.
Well, it's not my team. I was there for 2 years.
So it was like your whole career.
It was the start of my career. The two options that I kind of settled on here were J.K. Dobbins and Kyle Hamilton. Dobbins, I think he would be ineligible for this topic if he didn't get hurt. He had an injury in 2021, missed the entire season. He missed the beginning part of 2022, and then I think it was like midway through this past year he had a cleanup surgery or something like that. So I think Dobbins is probably my pick. He makes the biggest impact for you. I mean, I think this is a player who, going into his fourth year in the league, I think Dobbins is really, really prone to have a good year with kind of what they added offensively in Baltimore. But not only that, I just think he's a really, really talented player. He's got great burst. And, when you look at the Bengals, that's kind of what they're lacking in the backfield. You don't have a guy you can give the ball to on 3 downs necessarily. I think, you want to split the reps a little bit more with Mixon, considering his age, considering the mileage that he has. Your J.K. Dobbins, I think, would be a, kind of a slam dunk take there. Kyle Hamilton's interesting just because, he gives you something different at safety. Him and Dax Hill, they're kind of two different players. Kyle's a little bit bigger. He's like 6'4", 215, something like that. He can kind of play that box role where you can play Dax up top and kind of prevent deep throws. Kind of if you have to do a one high safety look, he's got the speed to do that. But I think Dobbins is the pick when you consider the need and then the proven track record in the NFL. Because when he's been healthy, he's been really, really good.
Yeah, I think their roster is not great, but I think Patrick Queen's probably the answer. I'd slot him in.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Had a career year last year. Sort of filled out the stat sheet, just looking at it. 117 tackles, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, forced fumble, 6 passes defended. Just sort of did everything, covered everything. It's tough because they have a player named Bowser on their roster. But I think Patrick Queen's probably the guy you'd want most to sort of just, no matter what kind of talent that I think you have, you could find a spot for him and put him in the starting lineup.
Imagine a linebacking core with Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, and Patrick Queen. That would be insane. Like, that would be, I guess, I don't know, would that be the best linebacking core in the NFL? If not, it'd be top 5. Because Queen is up there. I think he's going to get extended this offseason. Hopefully, I hope he does. I think he's worthy of it for how good he is. And actually, did you guys know, just a quick tangent, did you know he got in a actual fist fight with Joe Burrow in college? Where, they made up, obviously, they're cool, but it was like a fist fight in practice or something? Yeah,
the story for that, for people who don't know, is Burrow was, I think it was, he had just gotten to LSU, and, he had gotten, obviously the number one rule of football practices from high school through pro is don't touch the quarterback. Well, Burrow got decked by Patrick Queen.
Yep.
And Patrick Queen, he turns around and he sees a fist flying in his face. And the first one that was there wasn't one of his offensive linemen. It was Joe Burrow. And LSU players have kind of gone on record multiple times in the past. Like, I think this was kind of a big story in 2020. This was kind of a big thing that people talked about, like the LSU players saying, okay, we got somebody real here. This dude's legit. It's a really fun story to look back on.
Could you imagine Joe Burrow just decking Jermaine Pratt in practice in the face? That would just be so hilarious, which would never happen, obviously, because it wouldn't end well for either of them. But man, that is a heck of a story. I have been reading a lot about that. So when you mentioned that, Mike, I thought that was good. So who knows, if they're on a team together, maybe they won't fight this time, but it just came to mind. I think those are all good. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to get a little tricky with this one, because I know we said no Pro Bowlers are all pros, but Kevin Zeitler, who's a starting guard for the team, he did not make the Pro Bowl. He got the most votes out of all the AFC guards, believe it or not, but he didn't make the Pro Bowl. So he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. I think he started every game for the Ravens last year and all but one in 2021. And the best part about it, this might be better or worse for some Bengals fans. I mean, he's a former first-round pick who played with the Bengals for, the first 4 years of his career. And it's weird. He's made the rounds in the AFC North. He played for the Browns for a couple years, and then he goes to Baltimore, protects Lamar Jackson. So it'd be kind of like a interesting reversal of fortune, so to speak, of, now you want to kind of come back to the Bengals and finish what you started. I feel like that would have been kind of cool. Again, he has never made a Pro Bowl, but he's Pro Bowl caliber, so I think that's a fair pick there. But to kind of round this out here before we get into the back half of our conversation, this is going to be an interesting one because I think you could say this would get a lot of fans fired up. But the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are you taking from the Steelers to play in Cincinnati? Which has happened, by the way. James Harrison, once upon a time, for those who don't remember. But in all seriousness, who would you pick? And Mike Hilton, by the way, former Steeler. But anyways.
I would go with George Pickens.
That's a good one.
Think he had a really good rookie year. Covered him a little bit in high school when I was out in Alabama, and I thought he was a future star. His college career kind of got screwy because of COVID. Then he tore his ACL, but rebounded, had 800 yards last year. Really, I think Pittsburgh's going to build the receiver room around him. For Kenny Pickett, and so I think he has all the talent in the world. 6'3", just a really good I think future. The outlook's bright for him, I would say.
That's a good one. Yeah, and I think they're going to get a good player out of him too. Do you have one, Andrew, or are you still kind of thinking through yours?
No, Pickens it was obviously kind of on my list. I think he's probably the smartest pick just because, you're talking about a player who is probably going to reach that level, kind of like Mike said, you're talking about a player who's ascending in the league. I think an interesting one would be Jaylen Warren. This team does still need a running back, and, you kind of look at the size. He's not much different than Chase Brown. Chase Brown's 5'9" and like 210, and Jaylen Warren's 5'8" and 215. So, they're pretty similar body types. But the only thing with Jaylen Warren is you get a player who, at the NFL level, he's actually performed well. But in terms of kind of what the Bengals need, what could help them long term, my answer is actually a little interesting. I'm going to go Broderick Jones. The tackle that they just drafted, actually.
Yeah.
In Georgia. So the reason that I'm comfortable making this pick is because, he was a really, really highly recruited player coming out of high school. He goes to Georgia, immediately plays very well, obviously on a national championship team. He's not massive like Orlando Brown. He's only 6'5", but I think that you feel a little bit better about, lack of size there at right tackle. The Bengals are about to do that with Jonah Williams. But, I think that what you do there is, you're talking about a player who's still very young. He's 21 years old. And I just think that, you get him in the room and, he can become at least a pretty decent starter for you in a year or two. And I think that, when you look at the offensive line, 4 of the 5 spots are pretty much filled at this point, and right tackle's the only one. So I think Broderick Jones would be a nice addition.
Man, you guys got some really good picks. I don't know if this tops what you guys got, but I really like Alex Highsmith, plays outside linebacker for them. I mean, only in his going into his 4th season. Last year, he led the NFL in forced fumbles with 5. His sack numbers were off the rails, 14.5 sacks. He had 74 tackles the year before that in 2021. Hasn't missed a single game in each of the last 2 years. So he's a workhorse. He plays a lot of snaps. He's all over the ball. He can get to the quarterback. He had 20 quarterback hits to go with his 14.5 sacks. I mean, you look at the juice they got with Myles Murphy. That's great, but how nice would it be to have him, Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, and then Highsmith? Like, that's just that's a ferocious front. And then, you still got DJ Reader and BJ Hill. But, hey, like Duke Tobin said in Indianapolis, you can never have enough juice in the pass rush. And, he's a guy who I think is ascending to be one of the better players at his position in a matter of years. But that's a really good roundup there, guys. When we come back, though, we're going to shift the focus back to Cincinnati because I heard we're going to have a little party on New Year's Eve. What is that party, you ask? Well, we're going to talk about that when we return right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast.
Hey guys, if you love college football, we think you'll like the College Football Survivor Show. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and my co-host Shahan Jeharaja and I, each week we talk about the best programs, best coaches, best players in the sport. It's all football, no off-field stuff, no legislation. It's about the teams that are going to matter most in the playoff race. Will Georgia three-peat? Always on the lookout for angry Bama. The Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan battling at the top, and Penn State on the rise. The Pac-12 matters again, not just USC, but Oregon and Washington as well. The playoff is expanding. Expand your podcast listening. Try the College Football Survivor Show wherever you find podcasts.
All right, thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. So we won't officially know the Bengals' full schedule until tomorrow night, Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, but we know one of their games, which I think is going to be the biggest and most exciting game, and that is Bengals-Chiefs. It will be New Year's Eve, December 31st at 4:25 Eastern. 4:25 Eastern in Kansas City. So just like the 2021 season when they met in Week 17, only difference is that game was in Cincinnati, but anything short of a thriller. It was amazing. Are you guys shocked by that? Does that make sense? Like, does that kind of show you that the NFL really thinks those guys could duke it out for a 1 seed? I mean, what is your initial reaction to that scheduling?
I mean, it makes sense. I think I had kind of said, and I think you guys agreed with me if I'm not mistaken, that, maybe burning, I guess, so to speak, burning that game in Week 1. I think there were a lot of people, of course the Bengals make sense. That's a great matchup. And, why wouldn't you want that? But, that game is going to do numbers no matter what. Now you're talking about a game that, I mean, look, in terms of what that game is going to decide, like talking about two teams that are probably going to go down to the wire in terms of seeding in the AFC, whether that's 1 and 2, 2 and 3, whatever, that's going to go down to the wire. You're talking about an MVP race, which, going into the last 2 weeks of the season, I mean, depending on who wins that game, having the number 1 seed and kind of beating a team in a head-to-head and, having, leading your team to a bye week, that might matter too. Like there's going to be a lot of implications there. So I just think, it makes sense. I think in the 2021-22 season, nobody could have really kind of seen what was coming with the Bengals. They kind of came out of nowhere. But, last year they put that game in December. This year they put that game December 31st, obviously. I just think that, the league is kind of proving and showing you guys and showing everybody that, they want big-time matchups like that to kind of decide the end of the season because the Bengals are going to play a game the following week against a divisional opponent. So it's going to be a massive couple of weeks here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, it shows a high level of confidence that they think it's going to be obviously a marquee matchup because both teams will still be in that position. I still think you couldn't have gone wrong with it doing it at Week 1. I think it would have been a huge games. You could place it anywhere on the schedule, really. It would have been a high-profile matchup that it's at the end of the year on New Year's Eve. You're going to be competing with a lot of that college football stuff, but I think it'll stand out.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to do it in Week 1, and I was right with that. But I think, like Mike said, it would have been great to do that in Week 1. But we also know, because the NFL also announced international games, the Bengals will not play international games. So they're not playing internationally, and they're not playing the Chiefs or the Jaguars internationally. I think those would have been two interesting teams to play overseas. Are you guys relieved that they're not playing internationally? Because I don't know about you, but I don't have a passport because I've never left the country, and that is a long trip. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, it's coming up sooner rather than later. I think that they have to play in the next couple of years overseas. Not this year, but, I would assume that it's going to be in the next year or two after that, that they'll head overseas.
Yep. Yeah. Because, like you said, they have to at some point. It's just part of a deal that the NFL has with, these countries overseas. But here's a cool little tidbit. The Bengals are going to travel with the least travel total mileage next season. They're traveling just based on the cities they're going to 11,942 round-trip miles. That is the least out of all 32 teams. Number one, you could probably guess, is Seattle, because they're literally on the other side of the world. And Miami's pretty much number three because they're on the other corner of the other side of the world. So I'm sure they're grateful with that. And it helps when you have your divisional rivals and teams like the Titans. It's not very far down the street. So I'm sure they're happy about that too, because that travel will catch up to you. Well, stay with us, because tomorrow we're going to talk about Joe Burrow, because it's Thursday, so why not? And we're going to talk about more on his contract, the guessing game, which is a fun guessing game, and what Lamar Jackson's deal means in terms of shaping things up for his future deal. But once again, for myself, Andrew, and Mike, I'm Muhammad Ahmad. We will see you on Thursday.